So we're going to do the second part of color relief printing. So we go through multi-block and then jigsaw or puzzle piece. So I'm going to record this demo. This is the demo that I have. I thought it was Shinkle, but it's not. But I have a demo I recorded at home where I put my camera, my phone up, so you can actually see what I'm doing
From above.
From above. So I'll make sure you get the link for that. It'll probably help more than listening.
So should we stand up? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you want to stand up or take a look or walk around, that's cool. But yeah, I'll put that up as well. But so basically with the multi-block, last week we did reduction. So we just worked with one block and carved and then printed and then carved and then printed and reduced the block to get our print. With multi-block, just like the name says, each color is done on a separate block. So this one is 3 blocks to make this print. Yeah.
Nice.
So do you like print like each, so you carve it and then do you like print it onto the block to know what you're carving next?
Yep.
Yes.
That's when we do it for sure. Yeah. And I think that's a multi-block as well. My student's done that one.
That's cool. Oh look, see the meow. See, I could do that with the squawk.
This one's a multi-block as well.
That's beautiful.
Oh, yum, yum, yum.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So the advantages of doing a multi-block is that each layer has a separate block. So if you make a mistake, then you just have to redo that one block. If you want to change the color of your print, then you can just go ahead and change the color. With reduction, you can't do that as easily. The disadvantage to multi-block is registration, lining things up. So it can be a little bit tricky. So there's several ways to do registration. I'll go through some of them. There's probably more than I'm showing you now, but that's okay. So I'll start with the most basic. So traditionally, registration marks were carved into the block. So if you ever looked at traditional Japanese prints, they use something called kento marks. So kento, it rhymes with bento, that's how I remember it. So those are registration marks that are actually carved into the block. So each block will have a set of kento marks, or registration marks. And they're always in the same spot relative to the image. So when you transfer your image onto each block, you have to make sure to transfer your kento block marks as well. The nice thing about using the kento marks is that you can use blocks of different sizes. And if you do a transfer and this one's really crooked, as you can see here, it doesn't really matter because it's in the same spot relative to the image every time. So I can have a block twice this size and transfer it. I can have a block that's slightly bigger. You can't have one that's smaller, but so with the kento mark, it's basically an L shape here at the corner and then a bottom mark here. The inside of the kento mark is where the edge of your paper is going to sit. So keep that in mind. So that's the edge of your paper. So it'll sit in like that. So you want to make sure that the kento mark, the inside especially, is nice and square and straight. So usually when I'm working with kento marks, I will use a knife and a ruler and score the edge of the inside of the kento marks, and then take my U-gouge and cut against that mark. I showed you that before, to get a sharp edge, and do that for each one. So you want to carve around the kento mark so the paper can sit on the inside. So to get your image on each block, you have a couple of options. You can draw your image. I usually start with a key image. So the key image is usually last layer that's printed. But the first one that's carved, it has most of the detail. And it's the image that kind of brings everything together. So if you have like a couple of flat colors and then you print a detail layer on top, that detail layer will be your key image. So you can draw out your key image on paper and draw out your Kento marks and then photocopy it and then do a bunch of toner transfers. So this is a toner transfer with oil wintergreen.
And that's that image on there?
Yep.
Cool.
If you didn't want to use the oil wintergreen, you can have access to it. What you can do is cut your key image, make sure you have your Kento marks, and then ink up your key image and your Kento marks, print it on wax paper, and then take that wax paper and go onto your next block. This is my next block. Put the wax paper down and then rub the back of it. And because it's wax paper, the ink won't stick to it, and it'll transfer onto that block.
Hmm.
So you'll do that, you'll transfer the key image and the Kento marks that way as well. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
When you're doing the actual printing, I won't actually ink up the Kento marks. The only time you really need to print them is when you're doing the transfer. So when I'm printing, I'll print 2 layers today, just to show you. These don't get inked up at all. They're just there to hold the paper and help you with registration. So the other thing you need to do when you're working with Kento marks is make sure your paper is square, at least one corner is. So whenever possible, try to use the factory cut of the paper, because that should be square. I like to use a carpenter square, just like a square, to make sure they're all straight, at least at one corner. Because honestly, it doesn't take very much. You know, a slight shift will mess up your registration. So you want to really make sure it's nice and square to get really tight registration. It doesn't really take much at all. So they're a little tricky. They do work. I like a good Kento mark. So that's how I did this print. And this print was printed by hand earlier. So I'll go ahead and print that one.
Is this one of your favorite methods?
You know, I've done production for so long. That's the one I use the most.
Okay.
But when I did the owl, I really enjoyed the multi-block and the Kento marks. It does take more work because you're carving each block out. So, for example, if I ended up doing a block just for the owl's eyes, you'd have to carve out everything except for the owl's eyes. Some people get away with just carving out as much as they need, and they use a small brayer just to ink up the eyes. And I guess the advantage is if you don't want colors to overlap, you can cut out areas completely clean on one block and have a layer that's on top of it just on its own. So with reduction, it's constantly layer on top of layer on top of layer. So I think that way. But if you want to keep your colors more separate, then multi-block is probably the way to go. So it does take more work. I think Picasso did try some multi-block, and then he didn't like it because it was too time-consuming and too much work. So, but he started using reduction.
He did his studio.
Yeah.
Carve everything with this in.
Yeah.
Bit of a loner.
Yeah. So anyways, I'll mix color. Mix the green and then some blue with some raw umber, and have a green owl. Because it can. I printed this owl a number of times.
Camouflage.
Yeah. From a photograph, I took a picture of an owl in Cypress Hills. We were hiking, and then I just happened to glance over, and in the tree there's this little tiny owl, just like, I don't know, it's like holding my family over, and we all like stared. And
Cool.
So just a little barn owl.
I think so. It's pretty just
Yeah.
just a tree. That was good for 2 layers. We did a demo last week, so the box is still
Oh yeah.
tacky. And we use different types of ink, so let's see what happens.
Like different brands.
Different types, so different brand too. So at the university we use rubber-based inks. So they're oil-based inks. They say rubber, but I think it's just a type of oil. We use them for lithography, and we just end up using them for relief printing.
Is that your most detailed one then?
No, so this one I'm making up, it will be kind of the color underneath the
Underneath.
detail. So we print 2 layers. Again, if you have the opportunity, you would let your ink layers dry in between. So again, I'm just inking up the image, not the Kento marks. Traditional Japanese prints were done not with a roller, but with a brush. You'd actually use paste and pigment, and then brush.
How would the paint not get in the lines?
It's really stiff brush. I've only tried it once, and with something else. But yeah, they're very stiff brushes, and then they use it. It's, if you ever watch a video, it's really, I find it very soothing. It has a nice noise to it. What they call it, ASMR.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. 30 minutes of just watching a Japanese master make a print.
Bound to put you into Zen.
You betcha. So I got my ink blocks inked up. So I'm gonna start with my first layer. So I'm gonna take my paper and then really make sure it's in those Kento marks first, and then drop the paper down. Thank you.
You can take Patrick's class at university.
I wasn't in my last year, so I actually was planning on taking it last year, but
Yeah.
I had too many classes going on and I could not fit studio time into apps.
Yeah. It does take a bit of time. And sometimes we get athletes trying to take the class, and then they're on the road for most of the year,
Right.
Yeah.
and then they're trying to take the class that they can. Unfortunately, some people can, but not too many. They just end up being on the road. Something like a drawing class or maybe even a painting class, you can probably give them assignments to do on the road, but printmaking, not so much. Maybe relief. They
Or the bus still, guys.
Ah. Careful with the knife.
I had one student one summer he went to Coachella, so he actually brought his plate with him and some sharp tools.
Yeah.
And came back with a plate ready to go. I'm like, good on ya.
I think my friend Jill Phillips took your class.
Who?
Jill?
Jill. Oh yeah, yep.
Like she was going into dentistry.
Okay. Thanks.
It was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
She did a silk screen of my husband.
Okay.
They used to work together, and I think the assignment was like do a portrait of a, I don't know, I want to say interesting person, but I think it was like peculiar person.
A peculiar person, and she picked your husband.
Yeah.
Steady on.
It's still up in our bathroom.
That's great.
He used to say this Ukrainian word all the time at work, and it's like of him saying the word.
Oh, nice.
There's some brown here because we just did a demo last week, but it's
Yeah,
nice bubbly
Very
different.
nice mottled color.
Yeah. That's my first layer. I'll take my next one. Same thing, you want to make sure it fits into the Kento marks first, and then drop the paper down. And touch up. This is the bottom branch, but
Registration worked pretty good.
not
Mm-hmm.
bad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Get in square corners and make sure your Kento marks are cut nice and straight. And the registration works pretty well. So that's one method for registration. If you decide you don't like Kento marks, or you want to make an image that goes to the edge of the block, there's a second option. So, seems a little more complicated, and it is.
Which one do you usually use the Kento then?
Yeah, like I said, I don't do a whole lot of multi-block,
Oh yeah, that's right.
but no, I do it. So yeah, mostly reduction, but
Mm-hmm.
Kento marks work. So if you have a block, for example, you want to go right to the edge. You don't want to worry about carving your Kento marks. Then this is another method. So you're going to use registration pins. So registration pins, they look like this. I'm used to using them in silk screening, but they can be used for relief printing as well. So for this one, so each block will be transferred again, just like the first one. This one, if you get this is a little bit trickier. The blocks should be as close to each other in size as possible. I'll be honest with you, I'm not the, the greatest carpenter, so they always tend to be a little bit off. But all it takes is like a millimeter, and then everything, the registration will line up nicely. So, so for this
Couldn't
one,
you just buy blocks the same size?
you can buy blocks the same size, yep. Or you can try to cut them like I did. To help alleviate that a bit, when you do the transfer, try to transfer to the same corner all the time. So kind of like when we did the registration sheets, where we mark the two sides of the paper and the two sides of the block to get the corner, and you're always registering to that corner. We're kind of doing the same thing. So when you do the transfer, I usually will mark on the back of the paper with an arrow. I can do it here, but I'm always going to line it up with that one corner. And same thing with the block. I'll mark on the back of the block here, so when I put them down, it's always going to be in the same corner of each block. That way, even if the blocks are slightly different sizes, having them line up to that same corner will help with the registration. If you constantly put your image down the transfer, and you always constantly shift it one way or the other, then your registration could be off.
Yeah.
So if you always go to that same corner, then it's always going to be in that same spot, and it will help. So now, instead of using Kento marks, we're going to use kind of a mat board L. So it's kind of a Kento mark outside of the block. So you're still using a corner in a way, but using a mat board instead. I'm using mat board because it's cheap, and that's what we had in the studio to cut up. You could, if you wanted to, use wood or a piece of MDF or something, especially if you're doing a lot of it, because over time the mat board is going to wear out. So what you want to do is tape your L down. To the table so it doesn't move. And then when you're printing, so tape it down. I'm just going to take the tape off so I can lift the L out and show you. You want to take the block and then place the block on the inside of the L. So very much like the Kento, just bigger. And then on the piece of mat board or wood, you want to mark where your paper is going to go. So you can kind of figure out how much of a border you want. So I'm giving myself an inch border here and 1.5 inches on the bottom. So you could mark that with tape to kind of help you out. So my paper is going to fit
To the edge of
the tape. So some people just do this, they'll just use the tape, and that's kind of how they register. We can take it a step further and use these registration pins. So you set up the registration pins so they are kind of set up like So some people will make a center mark on the paper and then kind of space out the registration marks on either side of that center mark. So registration pins will go in here. Again, camera over.
Yeah.
Me talking about it, it don't make much more sense, but I'll walk you through it now. And then you want to tape down the registration pins. So it's set up like this. Pins are taped down. So now I take my paper, put where I want it on the board. So I marked it out. So again, there's an inch on this side, inch and a half on the bottom. I'm going to take these plastic tabs. So the plastic tabs have holes in them. They're the same size as the pins. So the tabs will go into the tabs and vice versa. So like that. So if I take the tabs, take my paper, place it where I want to, and then take my tabs, place them in the pins, and then using painter's tape, tape the tabs to the back of the paper. So each sheet of paper that you use. And you can use that for your registration. So the pins will hold the paper in place each time when you're printing. So you will print the first block, and you can take your paper out and put it away for a day, swap it out for the next block the next day. And because you haven't taken the pins off the L shape, they'll have to stay there, otherwise your registration is going to be off, because they won't be in the exact same spot every time. So this is yours to keep until you're finished with it. And then you just place the tabs back into the pins, and then print your next layer. So it works really well. So I'm going to ink up this in the same color. This one will be a mottled gray, because that's the color that's on there. That's okay. But does that make sense, using the L and the... Again, the video, the overhead view will help too. So. Hues does sell the tabs and the pins in a package. I forget how many pins, like maybe like 100. Yep, 100 tabs and then 2 pins. You decide to register this way. I guess the advantage is that, yeah, you do have a block where you don't have to worry about putting Kento marks. You can carve right to the edge of the block. And you don't have to worry about making sure your paper is square, because even if your paper are wonky, because when you do the tabs, they'll be lined up with those pins. The registration should still be good.
Because if your paper's not square, the pins are still lined up.
Yeah, the pins are still lined up relative to the block.
Yeah.
So that won't change. That's an advantage. Whereas with the Kento marks, you really have to make sure that's nice and square and tight. And I'm thinking where I'm printing. printing, I usually make sure the L shape is taped down to the table so it doesn't move. So I'm going to take my first color of the flat, and I'll put it on the inside of the L, and then I take my paper, make sure the tabs go into the pins, and then drop the paper down. If you want, because sometimes the block can still move, so you can try to use the drawer liner to help keep it in place. If you want to make sure it really doesn't move, what I like to do is take a piece of tape and then cut into it a little bit with a knife, carefully. And then peel it away, so you got an extra thick layer of tape. And then you cut out tabs that you can use to place against the other side of the block so it doesn't move. So the L would be here, for example, and then the tabs would go here to lock it into place. Use the factory cut of the tape. So if you want to do that, you can as well. So yeah, this is more complicated than the Kento.
Yeah, it is.
There's a nice kind of simplicity to the Kento block marks that I like.
More setup, but then more security.
Yeah, so, yeah. And you're more than welcome if you want to try the flip method that we use for reduction. You could use the same thing for multi-block as well. This is more precise. And again, if your blocks are slightly different sizes, then you will run into some registration issues. First layer. Put some black in it, because that's what happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take this block out, soften it for the other block. Lock in place those tabs. Hopefully, the registration should be pretty good. Outside as it can fill in, but pretty close. A little bit off the top there.
Cool.
So that's registration pins. So Kento marks, registration pins, or you try the flip method, multi-block. That's multi-block printing. The other one I'll talk about. I have to do something. is jigsaw, or puzzle piece. So jigsaw or puzzle piece. This is an example of one. So you have one block that you cut up into different pieces and put them together, ink them up separately, and then put them together to print. So you can see this is the mountain range here. Up the ground, and the sky, and finally the water. So this again has a single piece of linoleum that I carved out. So I carved out all the detail, and then I actually carved out each piece out. And then when it comes time to ink them out separately, and then when I'm ready to print, I bring them together, and then print all the pieces at once.
That's cool.
Because they're cut from the same block, registration issues are not a problem because
Yeah.
they just fit together.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you
He
can
said
use-
hopefully.
Yeah.
So you can do different versions quite easily because they're
Mhm.
separate pieces. So you can change up the colors pretty easily. You can always go back and print more. Try different variations. A couple of tricky things with it though. Cutting the pieces out, I would recommend, first off, I usually don't back my lino when I'm doing this, just because it's easier to cut. If you have a scroll saw and you're comfortable using it, then you could back the linoleum like this to make sure it's nice and sturdy, and then use the saw to cut it out. Usually when I do something like this, I just use a knife. I recommend heating the linoleum to make it soft, extra soft, so it's easier to carve. And make sure you use a sharp knife and be careful. And then when you cut it, you want to make sure you don't do a straight cut. You want to bevel your cuts. So when you cut the lino at an angle, so when you put them back together, they lock into place better. If it's straight cuts, they tend not to lock together as much because they're just kind of,
They have less surface area.
yeah, that surface areas are just kind of sitting next to each other. But if you do a bevel, then they'll lock into place. That should take care of some of the white lines in between each one, although it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. This one moved a bit, this one's a little bit better. Which brings me to my other point is sometimes the pieces will move when you're printing them. Those tape tabs help a lot. You could even use the L frame if you wanted to. You wouldn't have to maybe necessarily use your registration pins, but you'd have something to brace the pieces up against. And if you use the tabs on the other side, that should keep everything close together. I've used double-sided tape on the back of them, just to give them a little bit of stick to put them down on the table or on the press. But it's nice. It's like you see, the colors are nice and bright. Usually, they're quite separated. It's a different look. And if you wanted to, you could take all three techniques and put them together in some sort of crazy combination. I don't want to think about it.
You what?
I don't want to think about it, but you know.
I thought you meant
I mean,
like,
you could do
I don't
bottom.
think about it, I just do
No.
whatever. Oh,
You could do the bottom and reduction, and then I don't know.
huh.
Do multi-plate, then if you wanted to. Or black and white's good too. Does that make sense? The jigsaw.
Yeah.
So that's it for color.